Welcome. This is Cosmic Primate. Come with me now. Close your eyes and drift away to different worlds. It was Powell who broke the desperate silence. In the first place, he said, Speedy isn't drunk. Not in the human sense, because he's a robot, and robots don't get drunk. However, there's something wrong with him, which is the robotic equivalent of drunkenness. To me, he's drunk, stated Donovan, emphatically, and all I know is that he thinks we're playing games. And we're not. It's a matter of life and death, and very gruesome death. Alright, don't hurry me. A robot's only a robot. Once we find out what's wrong with him, we can fix it and go on. Once, said Donovan sourly. Powell ignored him. Speedy is perfectly adapted to normal Mercurian environment. But this region, and his arms swept wide, is definitely abnormal. There's our clue. Now, where do these crystals come from? They might have formed from a slowly cooling liquid. But where would you get liquid so hot that it would cool in Mercury's sun? Volcanic action? Suggested Donovan instantly, and Powell's body tensed. Out of the mouths of sucklings, he said in a small, strange voice, and remained very still for 5 minutes. Then he said, Listen, Mike, what did you say to Speedy when you sent him after the selenium? Donovan was taken aback. Well, damn it, I don't know. I just told him to get it. Yes, I know, but how? Try to remember the exact words. I said, Speedy, we need some selenium. You can get it such and such a place. Go get it. That's all. What more did you want me to say? You didn't put any urgency into the order, did you? What for? It was pure routine. Powell sighed. Well, it can't be helped now, but we're in a fine fix. He had dismounted from his robot and was sitting back against the cliff. Donovan joined him and they linked arms. In the distance, the burning sunlight seemed to wait cat and mouse for them. And just next to them, the two giant robots were invisible but for the red dull of their photoelectric eyes that stared down at them, unblinking, unwavering, and unconcerned. Unconcerned, as was all this poisonous mercury, as large in jinx as it was small in size. Powell's radio voice was tense in Donovan's ear. Now, look, let's start with the 3 fundamental rules of robotics. The 3 rules that are built most deeply into a robot's positronic brain. In the darkness, his gloved fingers ticked off each point. We have 1. A robot may not injure a human being, or through inaction, allow a human being to come to harm. Right. 2, continued Powell. A robot must obey the orders given it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. Right. And 3, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second laws. Right. Now where are we? Exactly at the explanation. The conflict between the various rules is ironed out by the different positronic potentials in the brain. We'll say that a robot is walking into danger and knows it. The automatic potential that Rule 3 sets up turns him back. But suppose you order him to walk into that danger. In that case, Rule 2 sets up a counter potential higher than the previous one, and the robot follows orders at the risks of existence. Well, I know that. What about it? Let's take Speedy's case. Speedy is one of the latest models, extremely specialized and as expensive as a battleship. It's not a thing to be lightly destroyed. So, Rule 3 has been strengthened. That was specifically mentioned, by the way, in the advance notices on the SPD models, so that his allergy to danger is unusually high. At the same time, when you sent him out after the selenium, you gave him his order casually and without special emphasis, so that the Rule 2 potential setup was rather weak. Now, hold on, I'm just stating facts. All right, go ahead. I think I get it. You see how it works, don't you? There's some sort of danger centering at the selenium pool. It increases as he approaches, and a certain distance from it, the Rule 3 potential, unusually high to start with, exactly balances the Rule 2 potential, unusually low to start with. Donovan rose to his feet in excitement. And it strikes an equilibrium. I see. Rule 3 drives him back, and Rule 2 drives him forward. So he follows a circle around the selenium pool, staying on the locus of all points of potential equilibrium. Unless we do something about it, he'll stay on that circle forever, giving us the good old runaround. Then, more thoughtfully, and that, half the way, is what makes him drunk. At potential equilibrium, half the positronic paths of his brain are out of kilter. I'm not a robot specialist, but that seems obvious. Perhaps he's lost control of just those parts of his voluntary mechanism that a human drunk has. Very pretty. But what's the danger if we knew what he was running from? You suggested it. Volcanic action. Somewhere right above the selenium pool is a seepage of gas from the bowels of Mercury. Sulfur dioxide, carbon dioxide, and carbon monoxide. Lots of it, and at this temperature. Donovan gulped audibly. Carbon monoxide plus iron gives the volatile iron carbonyl. And a robot, added Powell, is essentially iron. Then grimly, there is nothing like deduction. We've determined everything about our problem but the solution. We can't get the selenium ourselves. It's still too far. We can't send these robot horses because they can't go themselves, and they can't hurry us fast enough to keep us from crisping. And we can't catch Speedy because the dope thinks we're playing games, and he can run 60 miles to hour 4. If one of us goes, began Donovan tentatively, and comes back cooked, there'll still be the other. Yes, came the sarcastic reply. It would be a most tender sacrifice, except that a person would be in no condition to give orders before he ever reached the pool. And I don't think the robots would ever turn back to the cliff without orders. Figure it out. We're 2 or 3 miles from the pool. Call it 2. The robot travels at 4 miles an hour, and we can last 20 minutes in our suits. It isn't only the heat, remember. Solar radiation out here in the ultraviolet, and below is poison. Said Donovan. 10 minutes short. As good as an eternity. And another thing. In order for Rule 3 potential to have stopped Speedy where it did, there must be an appreciable amount of carbon monoxide in the metal vapor atmosphere. And there must be an appreciable corrosion action atmosphere. He's been out hours now, and how do we know when a knee joint, for instance, won't be thrown out of kilter and keel him over? It's not only a question of thinking. We've got to think fast. Deep, dark, dank, dismal silence. Donovan broke it, voice trembling in an effort to keep itself emotionless. He said, as long as we can't increase Rule 2 potential by giving further orders, how about working the other way? If we increase the danger, we increase Rule 3 potential and drive him backward. Powell's visiplate had turned toward him in a silent question. You see, came the cautious explanation, all we need to do to drive him out of his rut is to increase the concentration of carbon monoxide in his vicinity. Well, back at the station, there's a complete analytical laboratory. Naturally, assented Powell. It's a mining station. All right, there must be pounds of oxalic acid for calcium precipitations. Holy space, Mike, you're a genius. So, admitted Donovan, modestly. It's just a case of remembering that oxalic acid on heating decomposes into carbon dioxide, water, and good old carbon monoxide. College chem, you know. Powell was on his feet and had attracted the attention of one of the monster robots by the simple expedient of pounding the machine's thigh. Hey, he shouted, can you throw? Master? Never mind. Powell damned the robot's molasses slow brain. He scrabbled up a jagged brick-sized rock. Take this, he said, and hit the patch of bluish crystals just across that crooked fissure. You see it? Donovan pulled at his shoulder. Too far, Greg. It's almost half a mile off. Quiet, replied Powell. It's a case of Mercurian gravity and a steel throwing arm. Watch, will you? The robot's eyes were measuring the distance with mechanical, accurate stereoscopy. His arm adjusted itself to the weight of the missile and drew back. In the darkness, the robot's motions went unseen, but there was a sudden thumping sound as he shifted his weight, and seconds later the rock flew blackly into the sunlight. There was no air resistance to slow it down, nor wind to turn it aside, and when it hit the ground, it threw up crystals precisely in the center of the blue patch. Powell yelled happily and shouted, "Let's go back after the oxalic acid, Mike." And as they plunged into the ruined substation on the way back to the tunnels, Donovan said grimly, "Speedy's been hanging about on this side of the selenium pole ever since we chased after him. Did you see him?" "Yes." "I guess he wants to play games." "Well, we'll play him games." They were back hours later with 3-liter jars of the white chemical and a pair of long faces. The photo cell banks were deteriorating more rapidly than had seemed likely. The two steered their robots into the sunlight and towards the waiting Speedy, in silence and with grim purpose. Speedy galloped slowly towards them.
"Here we are again. Whee! I've made a little list. The piano organist. All people who eat peppermint and puff it in your face."
"We'll puff something in your face," muttered Donovan. "He's limping, Greg." "I noticed that," came the low, worried response. "The monoxide will get him yet, if we don't hurry." They were approaching cautiously now, almost sidling to refrain from setting off the thoroughly irrational robot. Powell was too far off to tell, of course, but even already he could have sworn the crack-brained Speedy was setting himself for a spring. "Let her go," he gasped. "Count 3. 1, 2. Two steel arms drew back and snapped forward simultaneously, and the 2 glass jars whirled forward in towering parallel arcs, gleaming like diamonds in the impossible sun. And, in a pair of soundless puffs, they hit the ground behind Speedy in crashes that sent the oxalic acid flying like dust. In the full heat of Mercury's sun, Powell knew it was fizzing like soda water. Speedy turned to stare, then backed away from it slowly, and as slowly gathered speed. In 15 seconds, he was leaping directly towards the 2 humans in an unsteady canter. Powell did not get Speedy's words just then, though he heard something that resembled,
"Lovers' professions when uttered in Hessians."
He turned away. "Back to the cliff, Mike. He's out of the rut and he'll be taking orders now. I'm getting hot." They jogged towards the shadow at the slow, monotonous pace of their mounts, and it was not until they had entered it and felt the sudden coolness settle softly about them that Donovan looked back. "Greg?" Powell looked and almost shrieked. Speedy was moving slowly now, so slowly, and in the wrong direction. He was drifting back into his rut, and he was picking up speed. He looked dreadfully close and dreadfully unreachable in the binoculars. Donovan shouted wildly, "After him!" and thumped his robot into its pace, but Powell called him back. "You won't catch him, Mike, it's no use." He fidgeted on his robot's shoulders and clenched his fist in tight impotence. "Why the devil do I see these things 5 seconds after it's all over? Mike, we've wasted hours." "We need more oxalic acid," declared Donovan stolidly. "The concentration wasn't high enough." 7 tons of it wouldn't have been enough, and we haven't the hours to spare to get it, even if it were. With the monoxide chewing him away, don't you see what it is, Mike? And Donovan said flatly, "No." "We were only establishing new equilibriums. When we create new monoxide and increase Rule 3 potential, he moves backward till he's in balance again. And when the monoxide drifted away, he moved forward. And again, there was balance." Powell's voice sounded thoroughly wretched. "It's the same old runaround. We can push at Rule 2 and pull at Rule 3, and we can't get anywhere. We can only change the position of balance. We've got to get outside both rules." And then he pushed his robot closer to Donovan's so that they were sitting face to face, dim shadows in the darkness, and he whispered, "Mike." is it the finish? Dully. I suppose we go back to the station, wait for the banks to fold, shake hands, take cyanide, and go out like gentlemen. He laughed shortly. Mike, repeated Powell earnestly. We've got to get to Speedy. I know. Mike, once more, and Powell hesitated before continuing. There's always Rule 1. I thought of it earlier, but it's desperate. Donovan looked up and his voice livened. We're desperate. All right. According to Rule 1, a robot can't see a human come to harm because of his own inaction. 2 and 3 can't stand against it. They can't, Mike. Even when the robot is well, he's drunk. You know he is. It's the chances you take. Cut it. What are you going to do? I'm going out there now and see what Rule 1 will do. If it won't break the balance, then what the devil? It's either now or 3-4 days from now. Hold on, Greg. There are human rules of behavior too. You don't go out there just like that. Figure out a lottery and give me my chance. All right. First to get to the cube of 14 goes. And almost immediately, 2744. Donovan felt his robot stagger at a sudden push by Powell's mount, and then Powell was off into the sunlight. Donovan opened his mouth to shout, and then clicked it shut. Of course, the damn fool had worked out the cube of 14 in advance, and on purpose, just like him. The sun was hotter than ever, and Powell felt a maddening itch in the small of his back. Imagination, probably, or perhaps hard radiation, was beginning to tell, even through the insosuit. Speedy was watching him, without a word of Gilbert and Sullivan gibberish at greeting. Thank God for that, but he didn't get too close. He was 300 yards away when Speedy began backing, a step at a time, cautiously, and Powell stopped. He jumped from his robot's shoulders and landed on the crystalline ground with a slight thump and a flying of jagged fragments. He proceeded on foot, the ground gritty and slippery to his steps, the low gravity causing him difficulty. The soles of his feet tickled with warmth. He cast one glance over his shoulder at the blackness of the cliff's shadow and realized that he had come too far to return, either by himself or by the help of his antique robot. It was Speedy or nothing now, and the knowledge of that constricted his chest. Far enough. He stopped. Speedy, he called. Speedy! The sleek, modern robot ahead of him hesitated and halted his backward steps, then resumed them. Powell tried to put a note of pleading into his voice and found it didn't take much acting. Speedy, I've got to get back to the shadow or the sun will get me. It's life or death, Speedy. I need you. Speedy took one step forward and stopped. He spoke, but at the sound, Powell groaned, for it was,
When you're lying awake with a dismal headache and repose is tabooed.
It trailed off there, and Powell took time out for some reason to murmur, Iolanthe. It was roasting hot. He caught a movement out of the corner of his eye and whirled dizzily, then stared in utter astonishment, for the monstrous robot on which he had ridden was moving toward him and without a rider. He was talking.
Pardon, master. I must not move without a master upon me, but you are in danger.
Of course, Rule 1 potential above everything. But he didn't want that clumsy antique, he wanted Speedy. He walked away and motioned frantically. I order you to stay away. I order you to stop. It was quite useless. You could not beat Rule 1 potential. The robot said stupidly,
You are in danger, master.
Powell looked about him desperately. He couldn't see clearly. His brain was in a heated whirl. His breath scorched when he breathed, and the ground all about him was a shimmering haze. He called a last time, desperately. Speedy! I'm dying, damn you! Where are you? Speedy, I need you! He was still stumbling backward in a blind effort to get away from the giant robot he didn't want, when he felt steel fingers on his arm and a worried, apologetic voice of metallic timbre in his ears.
Holy smokes, boss. What are you doing here? And what am I doing? I am so confused.
Never mind, murmured Powell weakly. Get me to the shadow of the cliff. And hurry. There was one last feeling of being lifted into the air and a sensation of rapid motion and burning heat, and he passed out. He woke with Donovan bending over him and smiling anxiously. How are you, Greg? Fine, came the response. Where's Speedy? Right here. I sent him out to one of the other selenium pools with orders to get that selenium at all costs this time. He got it back in 42 minutes and 3 seconds. I timed him. He still hasn't finished apologizing for the runaround he gave us. He's scared to come near you for fear of what you'll say. Drag him over, ordered Powell. It wasn't his fault. He held out a hand and gripped Speedy's metal paw. It's okay, Speedy. Then to Donovan, you know, Mike, I was just thinking. Yes? Well, he rubbed his face. The air was so delightfully cool. You know that when we get things set up here, and Speedy put through his field tests, they're going to send us to the space stations next. No. Yes. At least that's what old lady Calvin told me just before we left. And I didn't say anything about it because I was going to fight the whole idea. Fight it? Cried Donovan. But I know. It's all right with me now. 273 degrees centigrade below zero. Won't it be a pleasure? Space station, said Donovan. Here I come.